The first shot cracked through the air, clean, sharp, unforgiving. By the third, the laughter in the room had died, replaced by a stunned, disbelieving silence. And when her fifth shot punched dead center into the final moving target, every man who had mocked Renee Caldwell realized they weren't watching a hobbyist, they were witnessing a storm. You ever walk into a place and know right away that you don't belong, not because anyone says it, but because of the way they don't? That was exactly what hit Renee Caldwell the moment she stepped through the glass door of Copper Ridge Shooting Range in Tucson, Arizona. The familiar scent of oil, steel, and gunpowder hit her first, followed closely by the weight of sideways glances. She didn't wear tactical boots or a logo-covered jacket. No sleek rifle case or Oakleys pushed up on her head. Just Renee. 51 years old. Deep brown skin lined with years of sunlight and grit. Her silver-streaked locks were tied back in a low bun. She wore old tan cargo pants, an oversized red flannel shirt, and boots that had walked more years than some of these men had been alive. Slung over one shoulder was a faded canvas case, the kind with a tear near the zipper and patches sewn on in mismatched thread. No brand name. No shine. Just utility. Just history. She had barely taken 5 steps in before the whispers started. At the far end of the main room, near the rental counter, stood a group of regulars, men who looked like they took themselves very seriously. One of them, younger, maybe mid-30s, stood out more than the others. Tall, lean, smirking like he was born with it. Camo ball cap. Tight beard. T-shirt that read, "Don't tread on me." Logan Pierce. She didn't know his name yet, but she knew his type. The way he leaned into his buddy and murmured, "Check it out. Somebody brought a museum piece." His friend snorted. "Looks like she found it at a yard sale." Renee heard them. Of course she did. Their voices weren't quiet. But she didn't flinch. She just kept walking. Her boots made soft thuds against the polished floor as she made her way toward the last open lane near the back corner. She didn't look at anyone. Didn't explain herself. She just carefully unzipped the bag and pulled out her rifle, an old bolt-action Springfield that had once belonged to her father. The wood was dark, worn smooth from decades of grip. The barrel had been reblued, not professionally, but by her own hands. This was not a showpiece. It was a survivor. Just like her. She laid it gently across the bench, ran a cloth over the scope, then sat down and began checking the chamber, the bolt, the sights. Every movement precise. Every breath measured. Back at the counter, the laughter hadn't stopped. Logan leaned his elbow on the rental desk and muttered something else, loud enough for his buddies and just loud enough for her. "Watch, she probably thinks you rack a bolt like you pop a soda can." More laughter. Still, Renee said nothing. She loaded one round, then another. Her fingers were steady. Her shoulders relaxed. She'd been in rooms like this before. Rooms filled with noise and doubt and pride. Rooms where you didn't raise your voice, because you didn't have to. She took a single shot. Sharp, controlled. A clean hole popped into the paper target downrange, just left of center. She adjusted the windage slightly, exhaled, and fired again. Dead center. That second shot got a reaction. One of Logan's buddies, a younger guy with mirrored sunglasses perched on his head, tilted his chin and squinted. "Lucky," he said with a shrug. Renee didn't turn. She didn't even blink. She just reloaded. A few more people had started to notice. One of the employees, barely older than 20, in a navy polo and khaki range pants, walked by, peeking over her shoulder. He paused. "Ma'am, just so you know, we've got a friendly comp this afternoon. Some of the regulars compete. You can sign up at the desk if you're interested. No pressure. All skill levels." There was a tone to his voice. Not condescending, exactly. More like a waiter offering a dessert menu to someone he thought couldn't afford it. Renee looked up, just briefly. "What's the format?" 5 moving targets. Timed. Center mass and speed get the points. Prizes are just for fun, a trophy, a base pro gift card. Nothing serious. She nodded. Sounds fine. He seemed surprised. You want to sign up? I'll think about it. The young man gave an awkward smile and turned away. But Logan heard the whole thing. You thinking of joining, ma'am? He called out, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. We like to keep it fun around here. You know, no hard feelings when the scores come in. She didn't answer. She finished cleaning her rifle, placed it gently on the bench, and stood. For a few long seconds, she just looked at the range. At the people. At the walls. At the flags. Then she turned and walked toward the front counter. The sign-up sheet sat next to a clipboard and a paper cup of chewed pens. 5 names were already on it. All men. All written in thick, heavy strokes like they were carving confidence into the page. She picked up a pen. It felt light in her hand, cheap and unbalanced. Her fingers hesitated for a second. Not out of fear, but memory. The last time she'd held a weapon in competition was nearly 20 years ago, in a place that smelled like sweat and sand instead of gun oil. You don't need this, she whispered to herself. But another voice answered, soft, somewhere inside, they do. She wrote, Renee Caldwell. When she handed it back to the same employee, he glanced down at the name, then back up at her. You sure? He asked. She nodded once. I'm sure. He gave a tight little smile like he was trying to be polite. We'll call you when it's your turn. Good luck. She returned to her booth. The snickering had calmed, but not stopped. She could feel the eyes now. A few curious, a few doubtful, but most were still amused. She unpacked her small toolkit and double-checked every part of her rifle. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't performing. She was preparing, like she always had, quietly, methodically. The afternoon sun blazed through the windows, painting everything in a golden wash. And inside Renee Caldwell, something began to shift, not rage, not pride, but presence. She hadn't come here for attention. She hadn't come here to win. But now that she was here, she wasn't going anywhere. And they had no idea what was about to happen. The sign-up sheet was in, her name written in tight, deliberate print near the bottom, but the weight of it lingered heavier than ink. Renee Caldwell returned to her booth with the same slow rhythm she walked in with, but something in her posture had shifted. Not defiance, something quieter. She didn't look around to see who was watching. She already knew. The hush around her lane was a different kind now. Not the mocking kind. It was the kind that came just before a storm rolled in, when folks felt something brewing but couldn't quite name it. She unpacked her small oilcloth roll and laid out her tools like a surgeon preparing for something sacred. Cleaning rod, bore brush, soft cloth, a small bottle of oil with a faded label. She worked slowly, gently wiping down the old Springfield rifle like she was reminding it they still had something left to prove, not to them, but maybe to each other. Across the range, the noise ramped back up. Logan Pierce's voice carried over the crowd like static, loud, showy, trying too hard. Ladies and gents, he said with a sweeping arm gesture, time to show you how it's done. Laughter followed. Of course it did. The regulars hooped and clapped like it was all part of the weekly ritual. He stepped to the firing line with a polished AR-style semi-auto, a shiny red dot scope, and confidence that screamed louder than his muzzle ever could. 5 shots. Rapid fire. Not bad, not great. Tight enough to earn applause, loose enough to leave the scoreboard vulnerable. He turned back and shot Renee a wink. Your turn's coming, Grandma. She didn't flinch. Just clicked her bolt shut and kept polishing. Shooter after shooter stepped up. Some were decent. One guy had a custom SIG, another a tricked-out Remington. All of them made noise. All of them made a show. None of them made silence. When the range employee finally stepped up to the intercom, clipboard in hand, the chatter dipped. Next shooter, Renee Caldwell. The words hung in the air like a misfire. Heads turned. Conversations paused. It wasn't a full silence, but it was the kind that prickled under the skin. Renee stood up slowly. Her boots tapped softly against the concrete as she walked toward the lane. Logan muttered something under his breath about life alert bracelets. Someone else laughed. No one else joined in. Renee stepped into the firing booth, laid her rifle on the ledge, and took one long look downrange. 5 mechanical arms waited, ready to release targets on a randomized path. Paper silhouettes. Standard rules. Nothing she hadn't seen before. The young range worker, the same one who'd offered the sign-up sheet, hovered awkwardly nearby. "Ma'am, the timer starts on your first shot. Targets move at randomized speeds. You've got 15 seconds total. Good luck." She nodded once. No smile. No words. Her left hand adjusted the scope. Right hand settled into place. Feet square. Shoulders relaxed. Deep inhale. Long exhale. Click. Safety off. The world narrowed. The first target zipped from right to left, fast. Renee moved instinctively. One sharp crack. Center hit. Second target jolted up on a spring arm. She barely moved. Another shot. Dead middle. The third came in slower, trying to fake her out with a stuttered path. Didn't matter. Pop. Another hole. Fourth was quick, zigzagging hard left. She exhaled through her teeth, let it just enough. Boom. Clean hit. Final one launched straight toward her, closer range. She blinked once. Fired. Then it was over. 5 shots. 15 seconds. The air rang hollow for a moment. No one spoke. No one moved. The scoreboard clicked once, twice, then flashed bright red numbers, perfect score. Fastest time. The silence broke, but not with laughter. Not with clapping either. With stillness. That kind of stunned, unsettled stillness that only comes when something you thought you understood just got rewritten in front of you. Logan shifted in his seat. His smirk gone. His eyes narrowing like he was seeing her for the first time. Renee clicked the safety back on, stepped away from the line, and gently slung her rifle back onto her shoulder. She didn't speak. She didn't bow. She didn't look at anyone. She just walked back to her bench and began to clean her gear again. The young man behind her, maybe early 20s, black hoodie, bright red headphones around his neck, whispered to no one in particular, "Damn." That was something. Someone else nearby added, "That ain't beginner's luck." Behind her, a man with a hunting vest and coffee breath muttered, "Hell, that ain't anybody's luck." Logan's voice finally returned, brittle and forced. She got lucky. Targets must have slowed down or something. That was when Renee finally spoke. Just one sentence. Calm, flat, and aimed with the precision of her rifle. Luck doesn't group that tight. A hush followed, even thicker than before. Because they knew. They all knew. The laughter didn't return. Not even from the corners of the room. Not from the loud ones or the quiet ones. And certainly not from Logan. The scoreboard kept blinking, a cold witness to something none of them expected. A truth they couldn't deny. Because that was the thing about real power. Real mastery. It doesn't need an announcement. It doesn't come with fanfare. It just shows up, steady hands, sharp eyes, and a soul that's been through enough to know that silence is often louder than noise. Renee wiped down the wood grain of her rifle, fingers brushing over scars and nicks that held stories no one in that room would ever hear. She didn't need to tell them. The rifle had spoken for her. And for once, they had listened. Renee sat back down at her bench, her hand steady, her breath calm, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened, but the energy in the room had shifted so sharply, it was almost disorienting. Moments ago, the range had been filled with snide remarks, casual arrogance, and the kind of swagger that assumes victory before the game even begins. Now it was different. Now there was something else in the air. Not quite admiration. Not yet. But curiosity. Hesitation. A silence that wasn't just about her score, it was about what that score meant. She didn't rush. She wiped down her rifle slowly, carefully, moving over each groove and edge like she always did, like she'd done 100 times before in basements and bunkers, under tents lit with red lights and the sound of war in the distance. That rifle wasn't just a weapon, it was a memory. A survival. A truth too heavy to speak out loud. Her fingers moved over the aged stock like they were reading something in Braille. And still, she didn't look up. But she could feel it. Eyes on her. The people who'd whispered and laughed now weren't saying anything at all. Their heads were turned, yes, but not in mockery anymore. They were watching like they didn't quite understand what they'd just seen. And maybe they didn't. Maybe they couldn't. Logan stood stiffly at the far bench, jaw set, arms crossed, his buddies now quiet as rocks. He wasn't laughing anymore. His smirk had disappeared somewhere around her third shot. Now he was just watching her. Studying her. Trying to piece together how the woman he'd written off the second she walked in had just knocked him off the scoreboard like it was nothing. The manager shuffled over awkwardly, a man in his 50s with a belly that didn't fit his vest and a name tag that read Ted. He glanced down at the sheet in his hands, then up at Renee like he was trying to remember how to smile. Well, he cleared his throat. Looks like we have a winner. The words came out a little too fast. Like he didn't expect to say them. A few people clapped, more out of obligation than celebration. It wasn't enthusiastic. It was stunned. Uneasy. Renee looked up, gave the smallest nod, and stood. Ted offered her a plastic trophy and a laminated $50 gift card like he wasn't sure she'd take them. She did, but with no fanfare, no big grin. She slipped both into her backpack like she was filing a receipt. Behind her, someone muttered, "Bet she used to be a sniper or something." Logan stepped forward slowly, his boots scuffing the floor in a rhythm that sounded like reluctance. He stopped about 3 feet from her bench and scratched the back of his neck. "You ex-military?" His voice didn't carry the usual mockery. It was lower now. Slower. Cautious. Renee didn't look up right away. When she did, her eyes were calm, her tone even. Something like that. Logan nodded once. He didn't push. Didn't ask what branch, what years, what rank. He just let the silence linger a beat longer than was comfortable and then said, "That was good shooting." He turned and walked back to his group, who no longer looked like a wall of smug confidence. They looked like boys. Boys who had just watched a woman take apart everything they thought they knew, and do it without raising her voice. Renee zipped her rifle back into its worn canvas case and slid her pack over her shoulder. She moved slowly, not because she was tired, but because there was no rush anymore. She had come in with something quiet in her chest, a weight she didn't know still lived there. But now it had shifted. Now it was something lighter. Not pride. Not glory. Just clarity. She stepped out of Copper Ridge into the afternoon heat. The Arizona sun beat down hard, reflecting off the blacktop in ripples of gold and sweat. She paused for a second to let the warmth sink in. Then she kept walking toward her dusty gray Ford Fusion. The car was old. The paint was faded. The seats were cracked from too many summers. But it started on. The first try, like it always did. She tossed the trophy onto the passenger seat. It tipped over, clattering against the gearshift. The gift card slid underneath it. Renee didn't even glance. As she pulled out of the lot, the manager, Ted, came jogging out the front door, clipboard in hand, cap pushed back on his head, eyes squinting against the sun. He waved her down, a little breathless. She rolled her window halfway. "Ma'am," he panted, I wanted to ask, have you ever thought about competing? I mean, professionally." We've got regional qualifiers, sponsors, real prizes, serious stuff. With your skill, you could really, Renee smiled politely. I didn't come here to prove anything. Ted hesitated, like he didn't know what to do with that answer. You sure? I mean, what you did in there was just practice, she said. That's all. She rolled up the window and eased the car into drive. As the range disappeared behind her in the rearview mirror, she didn't feel triumph. She didn't feel vindication. What she felt was something softer. Like peace. Like memory. She passed a strip mall where a mother was helping her young son ride a bike in the parking lot. The boy wobbled, nearly fell, but the mother caught him with a laugh. Renee smiled quietly. That, she thought, was the kind of victory she cared about now. Not headlines. Not medals. Not applause. Just small moments. Honest ones. She pulled onto her street, the potholes familiar, the shadows from the old palm trees dancing across her windshield. Her apartment building was plain, the balcony cluttered with an overgrown fern she kept forgetting to water. Inside was a book she hadn't finished and a cup of tea that might still be warm. The trophy shifted in the passenger seat as she turned off the ignition. It didn't mean much. It never did. But what she carried inside, that quiet fire now burning steady again, that meant everything. And maybe, just maybe, the next time a woman walked into Copper Ridge with a frayed bag and an old rifle, they'd remember her. Maybe they'd think twice before deciding what power looks like. Because real strength doesn't need to shout. It just shows up. Sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the one who says the least. That's the heart of Renee Caldwell's story. It's not about winning a plastic trophy or proving something to a crowd of strangers. It's about remembering who you are, when the world around you has forgotten, or worse, decided you're not worth noticing. We live in a world quick to judge based on appearance, age, or the kind of gear someone carries. Renee walked into that range with decades of life carved into her every step. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't loud. But every movement she made, every breath she took before pulling that trigger, told a story most people will never fully understand. And in just 15 seconds, she reminded everyone that real skill, real strength, isn't something you can fake, and it's certainly not something you can underestimate. If there's one lesson I hope you carry from this story, it's this: never assume you know someone's worth just by looking at them. The quiet woman in the corner might have led a team through war zones. The man with the tired shoes might have built something incredible from nothing. The person you overlook might just be the one who's already done what you've only ever dreamed of. Respect is earned, but it should never have to be begged for. Renee didn't speak until she needed to. She didn't defend herself with words. She let her actions, her discipline, and her calm under pressure speak volumes. That's a kind of dignity the world needs more of. To our listeners and viewers here at U.S. Justice Story, thank you for walking this road with us. Stories like Renee's aren't just fiction, they're reflections of what happens every day in quiet corners across America. Places where people get underestimated, overlooked, or written off, until they remind everyone that resilience isn't loud. It's steady. It's real. So, if you've ever been made to feel small because of your age, your background, your gear, your silence, this story is for you. Keep showing up. Keep doing what you do with quiet excellence. You don't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes, the loudest truth is the one that travels in silence, steady as a bullet through the center of a target. Until next time, stay strong, stay grounded, and never forget who you are.